Shalom, this video is about the portion of Shmote, the very first portion of the book of Exodus. When we left off at the end of Genesis, Joseph and Jacob were in Egypt, living well under the protection of Pharaoh. Well, a change in dynasty must have occurred, because right away at the beginning of Exodus, we jump ahead, according to the Torah, 400 years. And it says, Vayakam melech hadash, a new king arose, must be a new dynasty that overthrew the other one, who didn't know Joseph, didn't care what Joseph had done, and saw the Israelites as a threat. And so they're enslaved, and not only are they enslaved, but Pharaoh decrees that all Jewish males should be killed. Well, the Torah says that the midwives, and it says Hebrew midwives, it's not clear if they're Jewish women, Hebrew women who were midwives, or they're midwives of the Jewish women, refused to do it, and Pharaoh demanded to know why. They said, well, by the time we get there, the babies are born. So here we have a case of probably righteous Gentiles doing the right thing and disobeying this evil tyrant. And then he said they have to be drowned in the sea. Well, there was one family who had a baby boy, and they knew they had to give him up. They didn't want him to drown in the sea, and so the mother went down and put him in a basket and sent the oldest daughter, Miriam, to go watch him. And by the way, in mythological tales of many cultures, you have the hero being saved in a river in a basket. Very similar hero motif in this story. So Pharaoh's daughter comes down to bathe in the river. She finds the baby. Miriam jumps out of the bushes and says, you're going to need a nursemaid here. My mother, I know a woman who can be a nursemaid. So the mother, Tzipporah of Moses, gets to nurse him, and he grows up in Pharaoh's palace. Now, Ibn Ezra, the great commentator, suggests two reasons why Moses was raised in Pharaoh's palace. One was so he could be educated. It's all part of God's plan. And the other was, interesting, that he should stand out and get the respect of the Israelites that way. He just wasn't another slave. Interesting that the kind of human nature that sometimes you don't respect the people that are right around you. They have to, there's a phrase, Ein Navi Be'iro, you can't be a prophet in your own town. In any case, so Moses grows up, and he says later to God, when God picks him for this job, that he's slow of speech. So there's a midrash, a rabbinic tale to explain why. That when Moses was born, the wise men in Pharaoh's court said that there's going to be a child here who's going to rise up and overthrow you. And it's Moses. So they put him to a test. They put hot coals in one place and a crown in the other. And then if he would grab the crown or lunge for the crown, which any normal person would do, it's glittery and it wasn't hot and burning, they would know that he'd be after the throne. So according to the rabbis again, like any normal person, Moses lunges for the crown, and the angels at the last minute took his hand and moved it towards the coals, and they were burning his hand, so he put them in his mouth. Natural instinct of an infant toddler, and that's how he burned his tongue. In any case, so one day he's out, and he's got empathy for the people, and he sees an Egyptian overlord beating a slave, and he kills the Egyptian overlord. And then he finds out later that Pharaoh's after him, so he runs away to Midian. And there he meets Tzipporah, and they get married and have children. And one day he's a shepherd, and he's out shepherding the sheep. And according to the Midrash again, the reason why God picked him was because a little baby sheep had gotten lost from the flock, and he went there, and the baby was tired, so he put it on his neck. He said, any shepherd cares that much about a little baby sheep would be a great shepherd for my people. So one day he's out by the burning bush. He sees a bush, and it's burning and not being consumed. Very awesome sight. And God speaks to him from the midst of that bush and calls him to take this job. And Moses says, who am I? I can't do it. I can't speak. Tries to get out of the job. God says, don't worry, I'll be with you. And that's the call of Moses. And so there we have the main story. It's interesting that Rashi, the great commentator, identifies the two midwives as the mother and sister of Moses. And they were rewarded for their bravery. In his view, they were Jewish Israelite women by being the mother and sister of Moses. And so we have a lot of interesting themes here about self-doubt for an important task, and God assuring him that he would be with him, and that gave Moses the assurance that he'd need. How you help move people, and sometimes you have to be an outsider to do a good job. The idea of these people defying Pharaoh to do the right thing, of moral leadership and assertiveness in a very difficult period. And this now begins the tragic and finally redemptive story, which has been so key to humanity for so many thousands of years, the redemption of the Israelites from slavery in Egypt. Now, I have another video where I ask if this is true. Try and deal with it from a more scholarly perspective, albeit in a 5-minute video, about is the Exodus true in a literal sense, but as a story of myth and a story that has empowered people to fight for freedom from that moment forth. It's undeniably probably the most significant story in human history.